Om Sadashiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Vishvaro Guratmeti Murti Veda Vibhagine Vyomabda Vyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Sava Vedanta Sedanta Gocharam Tamagocharam Govindam Paramanantam Satguru Pranatoshmaham Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So yesterday we looked into the concept of Upadhis. So is the concept of Upadhis a little bit more clear now? Or do we have any questions, Claudio? So the difference between the individual and the total, again, the total here it refers to Ishvara as the manifest universe. No? So the difference between the individual and Brahman. So when we say the difference between the individual and Brahman, we are kind of, into a very abstract comparison, because Brahman is the substratum, is the unmanifest, in other words. So the difference between the jiva is, it's represented by the three bodies and it's more tangent and so on. The difference between the individual and the total, it gives us the sense, of, okay, so now there is the individual and there is the totality. The totality is Brahman manifest by the power of Maya. So this difference is caused due to the Upadhis. Maya is the Upadhis of Ishvara, and the 5 sheaths are the Upadhis for the jivas. So since the Upadhis, they color the manifestation, they color consciousness when it is associated with an Upadhis, it appears to take some colors or attributes or properties of the Upadhis. So in the case of the jiva, consciousness appears as colored by the attributes, the body, mind, intellectual attributes of the jiva, of the 3 bodies. In the same as Ishvara, because it is colored by the 3 gunas of Maya. So we have looked into it extensively, and I want to get on here from the 3rd paragraph, when it says, when the individual is negated, what happens to the totality of objects? We might say, yes, I can see that my individuality was an illusion, but what about the universe, the cosmos, with all these planets and moons and stars and solar systems and galaxies and so on. So what about? I can say that individuality is an illusion. So I have identified with this body-mind complex, and this is an illusion because I am consciousness. But then now we are looking to the universe, the totality, you and the totality. The totality is all stars and planets and galaxies and so on. So when we look at the entire manifestation of the universe, it's a little bit more difficult for us to say, okay, let's negate that as well. Okay. First, because it's all over. Second, because it feels more tangent, than the body-mind construct. You see more objectively the universe. How can we negate the universe? And then what this paragraph goes about saying is that all this Earth, the solar system, everything lies beyond it. Everything. Is it also illusion? Yes, but Is the earth not also a perception? So the universe is an object, the same way. The bottom line here is when we talk about the universe, the totality, the totality of the manifestation is an object, it's a conceptual object in the mind of the jiva, which is nothing but consciousness. So the same way that we can negate, we can reject reality to the jiva, we can, likewise, we can negate reality to everything, because everything is nothing but a thought in consciousness. The cosmos, the universe, is a thought in consciousness. I, the body, my notions, my history, and so on. This I thought is an object in consciousness, in the same way that the universe, the cosmos thought, is an object in consciousness. Every and all object needs to be negated if we want to go to the bottom of things, which is that which is unnegatable, because you cannot negate the light in which things are known as objects, right? So that is what can never be negated, that which is always ever present, or never not present, as howsoever you want to say. So the earth is also an object of perception, just like the body mind, and is not the thought about the earth of the same order of the thought I, the body mind. Yes, it's an image, it's a thought in consciousness, name and forms, the same nature. It's all it's both of the same order of reality, meaning to say meteor, objects of the meteor, objects dense objects, subtle objects, but they are all objects, names and forms. And can anything which appears in consciousness be other than consciousness, whether it be Earth, planet, or my toe, you know? It is admittedly a radical truth, but a truth nonethelessly. All that we identify as the product of Maya, the world, the universe, and so on, and all that we identify as the product of our individual perception, our body-mind, are of the same order of reality, thoughts, objects in awareness. So that's the simple logic. So there's not much mystery about that. We know very well what an object is, what the subject is, and we know that the body-mind construct, the body-mind complex, the intellect and the emotional body and the physical body, the pranas, the 5 sheaths, they are objects that appear within the scope of consciousness. Thoughts in awareness can be nothing other than what? Than awareness. Again and again, everything, the universe, fundamentally is the thought of the universe, because as we have determined, an object is nothing but the thought of an object. And when we talk in terms of the universe, you know, it's definitely a conceptual object, because nobody has ever seen the universe. Okay, we have a notion of cosmos, we have a notion about universe. Okay, so it is a notion. Okay, so now a notion is a thought. A thought happens within consciousness. So how apart from consciousness is any thought, including the thought of the cosmos? Okay, no, it's not a part. It just appears in consciousness, and as we know, it appears in consciousness as consciousness, because anything that is projected on the screen of consciousness is nothing but consciousness. The same way that anything that is projected on the screen of the cinema, if we really go there to look to all those objects, we only find the screen in the cinema. Okay? So anything that is superimposed on consciousness is not really real, but it's just a superimposition. Okay, and when we go and look for everything, even the scientists nowadays, the quantum physics and so on, they start looking into matter, and they start just break, go into the subatomic structure of the cells and the atoms and so on. And then what they discover that basically things are not solid as we believe, as we perceive. So our sensory instrument, somehow perceives things in a certain way, but when we really go deep into looking into that, so things are not really what they seem to be. So everything is just awareness. And in quantum physics, they discovered that at the end, everything resolves itself to space. And as we know, space is the primary evolution or unfoldment of consciousness in association with Maya. Ishvara brings about the primary instrument, the primary element of creation, which is space, a container in which all other elements, somehow develop. So we know that thoughts in awareness can be nothing other than awareness. The implied meaning of the individual, you, and the implied meaning of that, which is the totality, is the same. Both are the self, and we know that that's where Vivekachudamani leads us gradually, as we become more and more advanced students of Vivekachudamani. It's going to take us to reject and negate everything. We're going to negate, in the end, we're going to need to negate not only the jiva, not only jagata, but we're going to have to negate even Ishvara. So Ishvara, jiva, and jagat, they are going to be negated by the time we are done with Vivekachudamani. So the thoughts are consciousness, and the self is limitless existence, knowledge, and bliss, Satchitananda. All seemingly limited objects resolve into awareness when their perceived difference, their upadhis, are stripped away. That's nice. All seemingly different limit objects. All names and forms, they are stripped away in the sense of their reality. Once we discount, once we deduct their upadhis. Vedanta sometimes speaks of Ishvara, Shrishti, the reality of Ishvara and the reality of Jiva. This pratibhasika reality and vyavaharika reality of the one project by Maya Ishvara. So Vedanta brings about this distinction to distinguish those objects which appear as a result of a cosmic ignorance from those which appear as a result of individual ignorance. That's very nice, huh? So we have this projection of Maya Ishvara, and then we say, oh, this is Vyavaharika Satya. Oh, it's a Satya. Yes, it is real. It is no. It is an objective, tangible, reality, but it is an appearance. Okay, it's not really real. And then it comes and says, and there is another order of reality, which is the reality produced by the jiva, called the pratibhasika satya. So why? To distinguish what it says here. To distinguish the universe, the world that is a result of the individual ignorance. What is the world that is the result of individual ignorance? It's our interpretation, or more clearly understood, is when we project the dream world. The dream world is all based on our individual ignorance. Understand? Our individual ignorance, our vasanas, out of the blue, they project the objects into space. There is nothing there, to it, but our vasanas are going to project all this world of dream objects. So this is Jiva's ignorance. And even during the awakening state, we are doing that because we are superimpose values on the projection done by Maya Ishwara. Now we have this objective reality that Maya, but it is, again, it's a sort of a dream. It's not really real. It's an appearance. Okay? So we have Maya that produce Ishwara, that produce this cosmic ignorance, as it says here. We have the cosmic ignorance and we have the individual ignorance. Therefore, Vedanta presents these two notions so that we can understand the distinction between the creation of Ishwara and the creation of the Jiva. But this distinction is merely a concession to how things appear when we grant the provisional existence of a body, mind, and other objects. It's a concession to how things appear when we grant a provisional existence. So we take this world to be real. Most people do so. This is ignorance, as we know. But we know that in order to be able to grasp and to fully understand these statements of Vedanta regarding the non-dual nature of reality, so we need to concede reality, an apparent reality, to all these distinctions between the creation of Ishwara, the creation of the Jiva, to the provisional existence of a body, mind, and other objects. Because if we just say, no, the Jiva does not exist and Jagata does not exist, there are no objects, there are no Jiva, and then we are left with what? We are left with the direct path that says, you don't exist, I don't exist, all there is consciousness, good night, go home and get over it. But that does not help much, as we know. It does not help much. So we need to somehow make a concession to how things appear, and then we know that there is Jiva and there is the world of objects, okay, so that we can find our way out of this cosmic and individual ignorance. The cosmic ignorance is going to remain, but the Jiva can at least freeze itself from his or her individual ignorance. So Ishwara, which operates Maya, is also responsible for the appearance of the Jivas. And neither Ishwara nor Jivas appear anywhere other than in consciousness as awareness. So from the highest standpoint, there is no Ishwara. Oh, geez, and there we come again with this terrible statement. So from the highest truth, there is no Ishwara, there is no Jiva. So what is Ishwara? Isn't Ishwara sought in the mind of the Jiva, which appears not apart from consciousness? Or when we talk about Ishwara, the creator, no, it's a conceptual object. In all of that appears within the only reality, which is consciousness. No? It appears where? In the consciousness of the Jiva, which is reflected consciousness, and it appears there as an object. So the reality is this consciousness that reflects in the mind of the Jiva is the only reality. And then this, this triad of Ishwara, Jiva, and Jagat, they are equally thoughts in consciousness, therefore they are nothing but consciousness as well. So from the highest standpoint, there is no Ishwara, there is no Jiva, and there is no Jagat, there is no Advaita. The self is all. So when we say that there is non-duality, there is Advaita, all of that is a concession to ignorance, because we cannot talk about Dvaita and non-Dvaita, oneness or dualness or two-oneness, because all of this is just absurd. Language is absurd, everything is absurd after all. It's all part of this mithya order of reality, which does not stand on its own. The self is the only reality. And even when we say that the word, the self is all there is, so the best thing in that case is the self is the substratum, the self is the only reality, the self is the totality, But even if we say the self is all, when we say all, it is misleading, as it suggests a collectivity of objects. All we all say. That's why I don't like a lot of the time I have to explain a little bit better this verse of the Vivekachudamani, because it presents that with the totality. And the totality means Jagata, Ishvara manifest, which still is not that reality that we need to understand when we say, I am that, or you are that. That it should not be taken to be Jagat, should not be taken to be Ishvara manifest. It should be taken to be Brahman, you understand? So I always have to somehow struggle a little bit with this passage of the Vivekachudamani when they talk of Brahma, suggest that Brahma is the totality, you know. The totality is still Mithya. It's the universe, it's the cosmos, it's the totality of all names and form. It could say is the substratum of the totality. You know, you are that substratum. You are that which pervades everything. You are that conscious existence space in which everything comes and goes. So that would be a better way to put it. So the self is all, even the word all is misleading, as it suggests a collective of many names and forms and so on. Language cannot escape dualism, but it can express a logic that serves as a springboard to that which is inexpressible. So we stick in Vedanta, as Ramji likes to say, we should always try to stick to the best of our ability to the language of knowledge and identity, you understand? Rather than the language of duality, you know, of time, space, and experience and action and so on. So we should stick to a knowledge-based and identity-based language. So when we talk about you are that, and that is the totality of names and forms, again, we are struggling a little bit, you know, but when you say you are that substratum in which everything, you know, come and go. And then we are talking in terms of non-duality, because that's the only thing which is one without a second, which is this substratum, this consciousness, you know, in which things come and go. You are that, and this is the only reality. Everything else is just superimposition in you. So anybody have any questions or objection, please help me out. Even dualistic religion, were it to follow the logic of its language about God, would inevitably arrive at the truth of non-duality. Some Western mystics, always held suspect by the guardians of dogmatic formula, have come perilously close to an explicit declaration of non-duality. So even some Western mystics, they come close to the understanding of non-duality as reality. And then they talk about this Eckhart, whose teaching suffered. I go crazy with all these words that these English words, you know, that I don't know, and I wonder why to use words that almost nobody knows. So what is this word here? So posthumous, condemnation. What is posthumous, Mark?
I don't know. Ask Lynn. Lynn might know. I'm not sure what it means either.
Posthumous is after death.
After that?
Okay.
Okay, let me see here. Now, Master Eckhart, whose teaching suffered a posthumous condemnation after death, urged Christians in the 14th century to realize that the Creator exists only as long as the creatures exist, that both Creator and creatures cease to appear in what he called the Godhead, which he described as the unmanifest reality, the ground of all being, where no distinctions can be found. So somehow he got to this intuitive knowledge that God, the creator, and the individuals, the created beings, they cease to appear in what he called the Godhead. Maybe he had some mystical experience that led him to that conclusion, or maybe even on those days he had access to the Upanishads, and that helped him to draw those conclusions. Who knows? He wrote, "The eye which we see God is the same eye which God sees us." So this is very nice, huh? So we see God, but we don't see God. We see the totality of the manifest, and then we can elaborate, we can intellectually develop this vision of wisdom, to understand that everything, the entire universe, nature itself, the rocks and this and the earth and the dirt, everything is this beautiful being, called the universe, which is the body of God. We can develop that vision, that sense, that understanding, So, and then he wrote, like, the eye with which we see God is the same eye with which God sees us. So it's very interesting. It means to say that there is only one eye, and this eye is consciousness. Huh? There is only one eye, the eye of the eye, the ear of the ear. You remember those Upanishads? The eye of the eye, the ear, so there is only one eye, and this eye is consciousness, that by which the eyes can see. So the same eye that conceptualize God and see God in nature, see God in all forms and names, the same eye is the same eye that with which God sees us, which is everything is in consciousness, He said that Godhead can only be known when we become detached from the object, most especially from our identity as created beings. So he definitely must have had some mystical experience. Such detachment he ranked as the highest virtue. That's very nice to put dispassion or detachment as the highest virtue. Huh? The truth of non-duality is not exclusive to Vedanta. Because as we know, there are a lot of mystics that came to this understanding as well. That's why we have these different traditions. No? We have so many different traditions that brings us to the same truth, that everything is just one, everything is on God, everything is on consciousness, and so on. The truth of non-duality is not exclusive to Vedanta, but the means of knowledge Vedanta offers can be found nowhere else, meaning to say that one thing is to be a mystic. One thing is to have this experience in which we come to this clear understanding that there is only consciousness, that everything is just an appearance, So that come and go, that all the time is just fading and coming back. So a lot of people can have this mystical experience, but this mystical experience, what's the problem of understanding the nature of the I, the nature of reality as consciousness and nothing more? If you understand that by the means of an epiphany or mystical experience, so this mystical experience cannot be transferred to anybody else. People can say about that, and I have read so many gurus saying the same thing. And then what can be said? What can be said is a description of the experience I had, the epiphany that I have that brought me to the understand that all there is consciousness, and consciousness is non-dual. You understand? So now what do? You had an epiphany, you had a mystical experience, and now you don't have any means to pass it on except by the description of your epiphany. But an epiphany cannot be transmitted. But knowledge, an extensive and complete body of knowledge, based on logic based on our experience of life not properly examined, this knowledge can be passed on, can be transmitted and effectively. Understand? So that's what distinguishes Vedanta from a lot of other mystical, esoteric, spiritual circles that talk about the truth but do not have a body of knowledge like the one we have. Mystical vision, even if it becomes an abiding knowledge of non-duality, is not transmissible. I mean, no wonder when Ramana Maharaj came out of his epiphanies and later on of his deep samadhis and so on, he did not know what to say. He was like, don't bother me, let me be silent here, because so what I'm going to tell, so there's not much we can tell. I just know the truth. And if you want to know the truth, what do you have to do? Go into meditation until you come to the same experience I had, and you need to be lucky enough to have the experience and extract the knowledge, because an experience is only as good as the knowledge we can extract from that epiphany. So this is why the great figures in the Western religion who escaped condemnation are regarded within their tradition as a special order of beings whose mystical pronouncement must be accepted as dogma. Yeah, if you don't have logic, if you don't have a body of knowledge, that you can present to people until the intellect of all people can say, wow, yes, makes sense. And I begin seeing the same way that the scriptures see. If you don't have that, and then what do you have to do? You have to say, oh, this is dogma, and you need to believe me, otherwise you are never going to find liberation. So that's the limitation of these circles, because they are not very verifiable truths, acceptable by a proven means of knowledge. And then there is a little touch of Ramji here. Most probably he says some modern teachers of what is called Neo-Advaita offer the vision of non-duality, but not the means of knowledge that allows us to become established in this truth. Knowing we are consciousness and there is only consciousness does not always translate into living as consciousness. And consciousness is free, limitless and independent from any experience or anything in which it occurs. So knowing that does not necessarily translate into freedom, in another word. For the knowledge to become firm, for the knowledge to fructify as the sense of confidence or freedom, we must perform the negations of the Upadhis. This constant discrimination and negation, serves the purpose of solidifying, making this knowledge hard and fast until the intellect is convinced, and until the vasanas that again and again comes back to say, no, there are two realities, consciousness and mithya, and the world of objects, So we need to go through the negations of all these upadhis until it's clear in our mind, so that this universal cosmic ignorance lose steam, so to speak. So in order for this knowledge to become hard and fast, we must perform the negations of the Upadhis as presented by the teachings, and often repeatedly. But why? I mean, I already did 5 times, it should be enough. No. So ignorance is tough, it's persistent. So we need to repeat it as long as our freedom, our sense of freedom is not there in spite of the world and the objects that appear, as if they could limit our consciousness. We must perform the negations of the Upadhis, and often repeatedly, or else our condition will remain. Exactly. Otherwise, our condition will remain, our ignorance will remain, and we will find ourselves split. I used to say, because I went through a lot through this state, it feels like you're schizophrenic. So one thing is what you know, and another thing is what you live. You understand? Your life and your knowledge, they are not really together. You understand? You feel like there is a split here. I know all of these things, but somehow this knowledge is not translating, in a way that my life and my knowledge are on the same page. Knowing the truth, but being unable to abide in the truth is the first stage towards freedom. We know it and it's clear and we have no doubt, but yet we have some old friends, some old vasanas, that still are going to prevent us the appreciation of our nature as freedom, as limitlessness. Right, Claudio?
Yes, it's true.
Yeah.
This is true. It's like schizophrenic. It can be. It must be. You have to really negate over and over again, because otherwise, it's true that you know the logic, but you don't experience it. So it must be real. You must insist. It's,
because this self-inquiry and self-knowledge is a great purifier, but it somehow it has to develop roots, so to speak, into the causal body as well, because it's from there that again and again pops up in our subtle body, in our mind. You understand? Again and again with those vasanas, those tendencies to see reality in duality and so on, and then when we see we are just living in a totally different way from what we know. So it takes time for those vasanas to be canceled or neutralized. And that's what Ranji puts in terms of self-actualization. It has to take its time until it gradually cancels this sense feeling of the ego that I am the doer, and I need this and I need that, and the whole ego saying, and which, because duality is all rooted in the sense of doership, ownership, and of the ego who wants to do things to find completion. So this is an old companion of each one of us. So it takes time until this sense of doership, ownership, authorship is canceled, and then we start living aligned with the statements, more and more aligned with the statements of the Upanishad. The verse 77. When the Upadhis are negated, no difference remains between the individual and the total. The difference between the king and the subjects is only due to a difference in status. Both are just humans, human beings. So we have this analogy of the king and the subject. So apparently there is a difference, but the difference usually is related to the way they dress, the costume, and the status, and the respect that you give to a subject and to a king. But fundamentally, what is the essential nature of the king and the subject? It is a human being. We are talking in terms of the analogy. In terms of the analogy, so both are just a human being. So what happens when they both sleep? So they are both human beings sleeping. And the king may have a dream that he is no longer king and he is a subject. And the subject, when he sleeps and dreams, he may have a dream that he's the king. You understand? So fundamentally, they are both jivas with three bodies, with three states of consciousness, So, but one is conditioned by the status of and the position of the role of a king as opposed to the role of a subject. But fundamentally, it's just a jiva, an object with three bodies, right? So likewise, the individual jiva and the total, you know, when the upadhis are negated, so no difference remains. There is no difference when we remain the upadhi of you and the upadhi of that. So, you know, what is the upadhi of that? It's Maya. And Maya makes consciousness appear as the totality. You know? So when we negate, reject this difference between the individual and the total, then the individual recognizes its essential nature as that which is the substratum, which is the essential nature of you and that. Consciousness, Brahman, and Jiva Atma and Paramatma, all is just Brahman, all is just consciousness awareness. So we are offered here another analogy to help us understand how the Upadhis operate. Social status is signified by dress and the relative importance of respective functions. So the status of the king wears a crown and the shoes commands. His subjects are more humble and they have to obey the commands. Both king and subject are human beings and they are the same thing. Yeah? A body, three bodies, yeah? With a soul, and in the language of Ramji, they are both different or two kinds of meat tubes. Yeah? One meat tube dressed up as a king and another meat tube dressed up as a subject. Ishvara, the totality signified by that, may be likened to the king. The individual signified by you may be likened to the subject. Stripped of their apparent difference, both are just awareness, consciousness. You and that, you and the totality is all consciousness, awareness. And then there is a subtle difference. I mean, just to make sense of these two analogies, it says that whereas the king and the subject, stripped of their difference, remain separate beings of the same species. So when we just we reject the role of the king as a king, and we reject the role of the subject as a subject. So what do we have? What is the common denominator? There are two bodies, but these two bodies, these two jivas, they appear yet in duality because they are two. There are differences between the two bodies, as well as opposed to when you strip away the appearing duality between you, the Jiva-Atma, and Paramatma. Understand? And then it's not that now we have two principles that are, distinct. We have removed Satchitananda, let's say, of Paramatma, and we have removed all the gunas, attributes of the Jiva, and now we have two different things. Now, when we strip away the superimposition or upadhis of Ishvara, or Brahman, and the Jiva, we don't have anything which could say this or that, So that's what it means. When they are stripped of their difference, they remain, in the case of the king and the subject, remain separate beings of the same species. Such is not the case with the totality and the individual. When the upadhis of the totality and the individual are negated, neither Maya nor Jiva persist in any form. So we are just stripping away all names and forms. There will be nothing to distinguish you and that, because you are that. And that is the purpose of these teachings of the Upanishads. the totality and the individual, the totality and the individual are superimpositions on the self. Once they remove, they vanish like the snake once perceived in the rope. So this is not to say that once we negate the upadhis, the sense will cease to function and the world will disappear. So again, the same principle. So these negations do not really affect the Vyavaharika projection by Maya and Ishvara. They remain. You strike the sense of reality to it, but it remains. The totality and the individual, they were superimpositions on the self. Once they are removed, intellectually in our understanding, they vanish like the snake once it was perceived as the rope. So when we negate the snake, so we don't negate the snake and the rope, meaning to say the rope remains, we negate just the superimposition. So the substratum of the snake in that case is the rope. So this is not to say that once we negate the upadhis of the jivas, the sense will cease to function and the world will disappear. It's not that it's going to disappear. So, but that the rope is going to remain, but it's going to be seen not as a snake, but as the rope. But that what we formerly perceived as separate objects will be realized as awareness. So, does anybody have anything to say? Any contribution? I'm a little bit tired. My throat is a little bit hurting today. If any one of you can help.
I was only.
I'm really happy, Arlindo, to hear about negation. I've spent so much time confirming that I am the self, but not negating the Upadhis. So to hear this teaching is really good for me, really important. That it's about negating as well as confirming my identity. It's about negating who I'm not as well, or what I'm not.
Yeah.
So it's really nice to hear this.
Yeah, it is very, very, very good point, Mark. Yeah, because sometimes we really want to hold this knowledge as our own truths, our real, truths. Let's say it's difficult to talk in terms of experience, but we want this knowledge to be actual. We want this knowledge to be existential. There are no words to describe properly what this direct self-knowledge is, but we want it to be hard and fast. And then we tend to say, yes, aham brahmasmi, I am consciousness, I am conscious, I am conscious. But then the vasanas are still going to be there, condition the way we interact, with the world and the way we react to everything that's happening to us. So we need to again and again negate the upadhis, negate reality, the reality that has been given to all objects we are in contact with, So it's very much truth.
Yeah.
We need to go through this process of negation and very slowly.
And in one way, it seems it's almost easier to negate the Upadhis of the world, of the universe, or of Ishvara than it is to negate our own Upadhis. In one way, I guess, because they're more objectified rather than subjectified.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, because when we see the world, we see it more objectively, although we project our own views and interpretation. But when we look into ourselves, we need to ask the help of a friend and say, hey, please tell me, how do you see myself? I have a friend I have been talking to lately. He's a bit in difficulty, and he he wants to ask me help to see. So how you see me in this context, you know? Why? Because we are too involved with ourselves, because this sense of identity as I, the body-mind complex,
Yeah.
is so close that we get involved and we lose objectivity. And then we need a friend, we need a mirror, huh? Someone who can tell you, oh, the way I see, and it's so easy to see that anybody can see us, but we have a lot of trouble to see ourselves, you know? No matter how wise, how enlightened you may be, you know? I mean, we jivas, we have trouble to see ourselves objective due to this, you know, this incredible intimacy we have, subjectivity we have about ourselves. That's why Ramji says that the whole process of self-inquiry and self-knowledge is about developing an objective view of your jiva. Yeah? Only then we can see the jiva from the standpoint of consciousness, and therefore make a stand in consciousness as consciousness. Right?
Yeah. You're beginning to break up a bit, Arlindo.
Yes.
Sound is beginning to break up a little bit.
Yeah, I'm not very happy about that. I have notes today that the internet is again not so good. I will contact this company to see if this is what it is, or to see if it's still due to the bad weather. But today it did not rain, but it's very cloudy. Yeah. I saw that Lynn has taken the video, and to see maybe if it gets better.
I thought that might help, but
Yeah.
it was off when it started, before it started breaking up. And I was, this is a beautiful verse, and appreciate your interpretation of it so much. And it occurs to me that at the core of all these vasanas and all these identities with the Upadhis is that core identity as a person, you know, just that separateness.
Yeah.
And discriminate, you've got to discriminate on a really subtle level, you know.
Yeah.
I think to just have the identity actually resolved as this, you know, it's real subtle stuff. And so that made me think about how the import of the teaching is to have that really healthy mind so that you can appreciate the knowledge.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was thinking of Meister Eckhart and people like him, and they must just have beautiful, healthy minds.
Who is it?
To be able
is
to
it?
grasp
Who-
the knowledge without the.
Who did you mention?
I was breaking up, I guess.
Who did you mention? It's my internet that's not. You mentioned the name of someone. You mentioned the name of someone, but I did not hear.
I'm sorry. It was Meister Eckhart. We talked about him in the.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Got it.
people like him don't have Vedanta as a teaching tradition.
Yeah.
Must have these just beautiful minds that they can
Yeah.
discriminate on that very subtle level.
Yeah. It's amazing. I mean, it does not come like for no reason. Definitely, he probably did a lot of previous work. Most probably he was in contact with the scriptures in previous verse. You know, because nobody comes to that level of qualification without being in contact with these spiritual teachings. So the same with Ramana. So it's not out of the blue that someone just gets that knowledge out of an epiphany, you understand? So, but what you were saying is very, very nice and beautiful and profound, because the Upadhis are different levels of experience. We experience the world through these five classifications called the five koshas, the five sheaths, you know. So we experience ourselves physically, we experience the world, you know, from the standpoint of energy and pranas and so on, and then we experience it mentally, emotionally, intellectually, and we experience those moments of freedom and great peace and love and expansion, those beautiful states, those beautiful experience of satya, satvaguna, or anandamaya kosha, as we say. So all these levels of experience define who we are, you understand? So our sense, our ego sense of identity is designed through this experience. So our ego is just a combination of all these experience. So we identified with these upadhis. We identified with the experience we gain through these upadhis, you know. So and it's not easy to get free or to transcend or to negate or to understand clearly that that is just an experience. Jesus, again, another experience. We need to go like in very, very much into the nuance of this experience, because fundamentally we define ourselves through this experience. This experience is going to tell us who and what we are. You understand? So we are identified with experience like nothing else, because we draw our identity through this experience. Yeah? So now, how can I disidentify with my experience? Because that is the root cause. Those are the building blocks of the ego sense of identity, is what I have experienced, which makes up my stories and so on, and who I am, and the roles, and my body, my my mind, my notions, my energy level, my emotion, my memories, everything. So these are all experience, and we are so identified with our experience. Sometimes in the past, I used to say that the entire process of the discrimination is discriminating you consciousness from your experience. So if we can discriminate ourselves from our experience, what it says? It says that every experience is an object, but this very subtle experience, very intimate experience, such as I, my body, oh, my body is hurting today. It's so intimate, it's so close to us that we have trouble in that moment to understand that I am not the body. Oh, but the body is hurting and I'm feeling it. How can I say I'm not the body, you know? So it's too close, it's too intimate. So how can we discriminate I, consciousness, from the experience on all these levels, you know? So this is the work of Vedanta, of rejecting or negating reality to all these levels of experience by which we define our sense, ego sense of identity, you know? That's very, very nice put, Lynn. Claudio, you were going to say something before?
Yes, I cannot hear you very well, the last thing you say, but okay. I was saying also that these verses are very interesting. I'm very glad to be on Vedanta, and you know, it's I always think that when in Vedanta, no, we say that Vedanta is the only valid means of knowledge, and this is a very strong statement, you know. Because the first time you heard it, you say, "Wow, no, this." It's hard to see something like that. Also, when I talk to people, you know, now I very often I find myself talking Vedanta to people, no, share some ideas of Vedanta, and it's hard to say that Vedanta is the only valid meaning of knowledge, but I must say that
I want you to say something in respect to that, because we don't often say, I don't hear our tradition say exactly the way you were saying that. We often say that Vedanta is a valid means of knowledge, and it distinguishes itself from other means of knowledge because it's complete and extensive. You understand? So it doesn't mean to say that there are no other means for self-knowledge. And if
okay,
there are other means of self-knowledge that may work for some people if they are more qualified. Vedanta works for all people because it's so extensive, it's so complete, so vast that it has knowledge to neutralize all sorts of wrong notions about the nature of the I, the nature of the self. So it's very extensive and it's very complete. At least I haven't seen anything as extensive and complete. It is a valid means of knowledge. It has been working forever. And if anybody who comes into the spiritual world with anything that they call my teaching, you can be sure that it's not really extensive, it's not complete. Usually it's just small bits and pieces of the knowledge present in the Vedic culture, So, and that therefore it does not work for everybody. It may work for some, but not for everybody, because you need to have a knowledge that can cure. You need to have a medicine that cures all disease. If you have a medicine to cure just one aspect of the disease here and there, you're going to benefit just a few people, And Vedanta is really extensive and complete. It complete also because it covers things about Mithya, which most of these other teachings do not even touch. They don't even enter in Mithya, you understand? They go direct to the ultimate truth and so on. So that's what we say.
Okay, this is important to know. Thank you, because when I talk about Vedanta, it's important to recognize that. But in any case, I really appreciate Vedanta, because I found every time more that it's very precise and it's real complete. It's very I glad about that, and happy that my karma brought me in Vedanta.
Yeah, and it's important to keep in mind that Vedanta is something so that we can, it's not about study it academically, or it's not about Vedanta itself, but it's about us. It has to be applied in my intellect, my life, until it transforms us, I mean, the transformation of our mental, emotional, and personality needs to be transformed. That's the goal of Vedanta, you understand? So that we can live freely, or as freely as a human being can be, in the sense that one recognizes my true nature as free, limitless, independent consciousness, which does not modify to any object of experience. So, and then the jiva can live from that platform of understanding and experience this confidence, this sense of freedom inherent to his or her true nature, you understand? So it needs to transform our personality. And what brings us back together again and again is the fact that we can see that Vedanta is already transforming, affecting, purifying my personality, That's what keeps people, doing the work, Some people, they do not have the patience, some they don't have the trust, and they don't have the humility, the humbleness, and then they try a little bit and they just jump into something else. But the people who stays with it stays because they begin sensing this transformation, and that transformation is the goal of Vedanta. It's not just about knowing, knowing this body of knowledge, right, Claudio?
Yes, of course. Yes, it's to practice, as we say just a few minutes ago. You have to repeatedly apply it and live it. Of course, yes. It's not only knowledge, of course, but knowledge is very good. It's very interesting. I don't know how to say in English, but it's very precise logic. It helps me a lot to understand because I have a lot of things. I've done a lot of things in the past. I meet other gurus, other enlightened people that say that they are enlightened. I don't know if they are really enlightened, but now I see ignorance way more better, and I clarify every time more my experience, my past experience, and it helps me.
Yeah, that's good. So I want to ask you guys to excuse myself, but my throat is hurting. I'm tired and the internet is a bit low. Can we meet on Thursday again on our usual time on Thursday? I'm a little bit running out of energy here. Is that all right?
Yes, of course.
Okay.
Yes. Beautiful, Sat.
Oh, I'm glad you enjoyed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. Very, very interesting.
Om Purnamidam.
Yeah, thanks, Arlindo. Beautiful.
Purnamidam. Purnamudachyate. Purnasya. Purnamadaya. Purnameva vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you, Lord. Thank you all. So we meet again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Much love. Bye-bye.
Ciao, ciao.